Erwidan, Zubin, California. They called themselves the HOA, and anyone from the surrounding counties recognized those three letters as a force more intimidating than local law enforcement. You might wonder, how could a homeowners association wield such power? The truth was far darker. Behind that polite label lurked a female mastermind, who brokered alliances with wealthy real estate developers, corporate polluters, and even government officials. Her name was Helena Rosell, and under her watch, the HOA bullied struggling landowners into selling precious acreage for next to nothing. Then, they flipped those properties for a fortune. That might not have mattered to a man like Oliver Green if it weren't for the letter pinned to his farmhouse door, the one that threatened to bury him under fines and fees unless he handed over rights to a waterway that ran through his late father's land. Oliver's property had been in his family for generations. He was determined not to lose it. But the HOA sent a final notice, gave him 30 days to comply, and implied that community guidelines allowed them to seize his acreage if he resisted. Oliver had no illusions. He was just a simple farmer. He wasn't prepared for legal battles with corporate giants, nor was he skilled at campaigning in City Hall. Perhaps that was why, on a restless Saturday afternoon, he found himself walking into the most exclusive shooting range in the state, a place where rumors said Helena Rosell and her billionaire backers sometimes met in private, confident that no outsider would dare intrude. Oliver thought if he could glean any scrap of evidence about the HOA's secret land grab deals, maybe he could save his farm. He never imagined he would be mocked the moment he set foot inside, never imagined how the next 10 shots he fired would leave the entire crowd of VIPs, some among the richest people in the country, utterly speechless. The place was called Silverleaf Shooting Club, a massive complex with marble floors polished so smooth they reflected the overhead chandeliers in gentle blurs. Attendants in crisp black uniforms escorted guests into private lounges that cost more per year than Oliver's entire farm could earn. He passed a reception desk where a young woman with meticulously braided hair raised an eyebrow at his worn denim jacket and scuffed boots. She scanned the visitor database. "Your membership code?" she inquired, voice tinged with skepticism. Oliver slid a card across the counter. It belonged to a friend of a friend, someone who owed him a favor and rarely used the membership anyway. The receptionist studied it, typed into her computer, and a flicker of surprise crossed her face. "You're Oliver Green?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," he replied, trying to hide his nerves. Her brow furrowed, but she nodded. "Fine, Lane 7 is open. But please understand that certain VIP sections are off limits unless specifically invited." "Understood," he murmured, pocketing the card and glancing around. He couldn't help noticing that along the far side of the club, behind tall glass partitions, loomed a separate lounge area marked Executive Range. That, he knew, was where the real power brokers gathered. He'd heard rumors about Helena Rosell appearing there from time to time, flanked by shady industrialists and a handful of aloof politicians. If she was here, Oliver intended to find a subtle way to approach, or at least overhear enough to discover how the HOA planned to force him off his land. He made his way to Lane 7, a standard booth with an electronic target system. The smell of gunpowder wafted through the air. He rented a basic pistol from the range attendant, a young man who seemed half Oliver's age, and tried to calm the tension thrumming in his veins. He wasn't exactly an expert marksman, but his father had taught him the basics. As he loaded the pistol, a burst of raucous laughter echoed from the executive range. Oliver's gaze flicked to see a group of impeccably dressed men and women testing some exotic-looking firearms. Their sophistication reminded him how out of place he was here. But he had a mission. If Helena Rosell truly was in that crowd, he needed to confirm it. Maybe he could eavesdrop, gather a recording on his phone and use it as leverage, or maybe it was all a fool's errand. Still, he planted his feet, aimed at the target 10 yards away, fired a shot. It landed off-center but not terrible. He adjusted, fired again. Between shots, he paused to peek at the executive range. He saw a tall woman with a severe haircut, wearing a pristine white blouse and black slacks. Even from across the club, she radiated authority. Oliver recognized her face from local news segments about community revitalization. Yes, that had to be Helena Rossell. Her voice carried with an edge of confidence. He tried to read her lips, but the plexiglass partition blocked most sound. Another booming laugh erupted from the VIP lounge. A couple of men in tailored suits turned to watch Oliver, pointing in mild amusement at his stance. One leaned over to Helena, presumably making some remark about the farmer boy messing around in the cheap lanes. She glanced fleetingly in Oliver's direction, eyes narrowed. Oliver's cheeks warmed, but he forced himself to stay calm. He fired another shot, determined to keep his composure. Then, to his surprise, the glass partition slid open. A staffer from the executive range stepped out with a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. He called across the floor, "Sir, we'd like to invite you to try out something in the VIP lounge. One of our sponsors says he's curious about your shooting technique." Oliver blinked, half suspecting a prank. Why would anyone in that lounge care about him, a random visitor? The staffer beckoned impatiently. Oliver hesitated, then made his way over, feeling the stares of half a dozen suits. He recognized no one except Helena, though she seemed less interested in him than in some document she was skimming. "Here he is," said the staffer, gesturing at Oliver like a sideshow exhibit. The group parted, revealing an older man with silver hair and an expensive watch. He introduced himself as Samuel Morrow, apparently a major investor in local real estate. Morrow's eyes sparkled with amusement. "I saw you fumbling with that pistol, friend," he said. "Mind giving us a demonstration? We're bored, you see, waiting for Ms. Rossell to finalize some negotiations. Perhaps we can have a little bet on the side." Oliver's gut twisted. He sensed their mockery. But if this allowed him to remain in the VIP area and possibly overhear something about the HOA, it might be worth swallowing his pride. "I'm not sure I'm the right person for bets," he said. Morrow smirked. "Oh, come on. We rarely get new faces here. Let's lighten the mood. 10 shots at a standard silhouette. See how many you can land in the bullseye. If you do well, maybe you walk away with a bonus. If you do poorly, well, we'll figure out a penalty." Oliver bristled inwardly. They treated him like entertainment. He glanced around the lounge, noticing Helena Rossell had now turned her gaze on him, silent but curious. Another man, a younger executive type, laughed. "Bet he can't land more than one bullseye. Farmers can't possibly handle advanced weaponry." That jab stung. Oliver inhaled. He had practiced enough to hold his own. He was no elite shooter, but he wasn't helpless. "All right," he heard himself say. "I'll give it a try." A ripple of smug pleasure passed among the suits. They led him to a lane with a high-tech digital scoring system. Morrow handed Oliver a sleek custom pistol, far more sophisticated than the standard rental. "This is the Kelsing P8, Morrow explained, stroking the polished slide. "Military-grade engineering, half the recoil you're used to." Oliver tested the weight. The grip felt unnervingly comfortable, like it was molded to his hand. "All right," he murmured. The staff keyed a new silhouette target 30 yards away. That was a bit beyond normal pistol range for precise bullseyes. Morrow gestured grandly. "Have at it, my friend. Show us what a farm boy can do." Helena Rossell watched from behind a tall table, sipping a glass of sparkling water. Oliver squared his shoulders, took aim. In the hush that fell over the lounge, he imagined his father's voice, reminding him to keep his elbow steady. Exhale before the trigger press. He fired. The bullet whacked into the silhouette's outer ring. A lukewarm start. Polite snickers arose from the group. He fired again. This time the shot landed a bit closer to center. Another snicker. "Two down," someone said softly. Oliver's heart thumped. If he let them see him as a total incompetent, would that glean any advantage, or would it just reinforce their scorn? But then he remembered why he was here. The farmland, the water rights, the harassment. These people believed they could steamroll anyone. Something about their arrogant smirks ignited Oliver's frustration. On the third shot, he aligned the pistol more carefully, controlling his breath. The bullet struck near the bullseye. The digital system beeped a high score, 9 out of 10. The group quieted. He took the fourth shot, refining his stance further. A 9.4. Now a hush fell. The suits exchanged glances. The fifth soared even closer. 9.7. Morrow's jaw tightened. A brief flicker of interest crossed Helena's face. Even from a distance, Oliver could sense her studying him like a piece of data she needed to interpret. By the seventh shot, he was consistently landing near or at the bullseye, each bullet grouping tighter than the last. He felt adrenaline surging. The eighth shot. Another near perfect. The onlookers gave little murmurs of surprise. So much for the incompetent farm boy. When he finished the 10th shot, the scoreboard displayed an average above 9, culminating in a final cluster that would impress any regular shooter. Oliver set the pistol down, swallowing the lump in his throat. "That enough demonstration for you?" he asked, voice steadier than he felt. Morrow cleared his throat. "Well, that was better than I expected." Another man with a glass of expensive whiskey in hand forced a jovial chuckle. "Beginner's luck, I'm sure. But good show." One of the female executives, hair pulled tight in a severe bun, whispered to Helena. The older woman nodded once. Then Helena herself walked forward, her heels clicking on the polished floor. She exuded confidence with every step. "Oliver Green, right?" she asked, as though she'd memorized his membership detail or recognized him from HOA files. He nodded, wary. "Yes." "Ms. Russell, I believe?" A faint smile curved on her lips. "Indeed. You've caused quite a stir among my associates." She looked at the target's readout. "Impressive accuracy. But I suspect you're here for a reason beyond mere practice. Shall we talk?" Oliver's pulse quickened. Maybe he'd get the chance to ask about the farmland, but he also feared she'd corner him into a humiliating confrontation. "I'm game," he said, squaring his shoulders. Helena gestured to a side lounge area, away from the firing lanes. A cluster of plush chairs formed a semicircle near a tinted window overlooking a courtyard. She sank into one seat with regal poise, indicating Oliver should sit across from her. The rest of the crowd hovered at a polite distance, though some watched like hawks anticipating drama. "So," Helena began, swirling the remainder of her sparkling water, "you're obviously not a typical tourist. You come in here with an old membership pass, shoot like you've had training, and catch my attention. Are you working for someone, or is this just a whim?" Oliver forced a calm tone. "I live outside the city, Ms. Russell, on farmland that's been in my family for generations. Lately, I've received repeated letters from the HOA about water rights and so-called community regulations. The fees keep piling up. I'm near losing everything. So I thought maybe, if I got close to the source, to you, I could find answers, or at least plead my case." Her expression remained unreadable. "Your farmland, that must be the property near the old Pine Creek Reservoir, right? The place your father tended?" Oliver's chest tightened. She knew exactly who he was then. "Yes, that's the place." She tapped a manicured nail on her armrest. "We do have an interest in that area. You see, the water table there is exceptionally pure. Some of our partners believe it could be harnessed for expansions, bottling plants, research, potential development. You might consider it a boon to the region's economy." He couldn't help a bitter laugh. "A boon for whom? No one asked if I wanted to give up my land or see it turned into an industrial site. All I get are notices threatening fines." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Your father was more cooperative in the early stages, though of course that was before he passed. Now the question is, will you adapt to progress or cling to an outmoded concept of land ownership? He bristled. I'm not opposed to progress, ma'am, but I am opposed to bullying. The HOA's threatening to bankrupt me if I don't sign over partial rights. That doesn't sound like cooperation. She took another slow sip of her drink. We have expenses. The region's infrastructure needs modernization. The community guidelines, as you say, must be enforced. Oliver recognized the corporate doublespeak. He pressed on. Look, I came here hoping I could talk to you, see if there's a fair compromise. We can't all be millionaires, but we do have a right to our homes. Maybe there's a solution that doesn't involve forcing me out. I'm sure my father would have wanted a fair arrangement, not an ultimatum. Helena studied him for a tense moment. She glanced at the small audience that had gathered. Suits, investors, the same bystanders who had laughed at Oliver's first wide shots. With them watching, perhaps she wanted to assert her dominance. She leaned forward. Mr. Green, if you sign the agreement that grants the HOA partial well rights and allows certain designated usage, you'd get a decent check. Enough to pay your debts, maybe improve your farm. But if you refuse, we'll keep issuing citations. Eventually, we'll foreclose under non-compliance. That's not a threat, it's just how the system works. He inhaled sharply. So you're telling me I have no choice? A flicker of amusement crossed her features. I'm telling you that progress can't be halted by sentimentality. If you're wise, you'll accept. The entire conversation made Oliver's blood boil. But he also sensed there was little point in continuing. She was locked in her approach. He stood. Thank you for the chat, Miss Rosell, but I'm not signing anything until I find a real solution that doesn't wreck my family's legacy. A mild scoff from one of the bystanders. Helena rose as well, setting her glass aside. Very well, but do remember your demonstration at the range might amuse the crowd, but it won't stop the legal process. However, if you wish to remain, perhaps we can have a friendly competition. Something to lighten the mood, show everyone that we can keep matters civil. After all, you surprised them with your marksmanship. Oliver's brow furrowed. A competition? She tilted her head. You say you're no typical farm boy. Why not prove it further? We can do a challenge, 10 shots at advanced targets. If you succeed beyond a threshold, I'll personally consider adjusting your fees or granting you extra time. If you fail, well, maybe you'll realize that stubbornness rarely pays off. He recognized a trap. She wanted to humiliate him publicly, show him as incompetent to her wealthy peers. But if there was a chance, any chance, he might soften the HOA's stance on his farmland, it was worth a shot. All right, he said, bracing himself. Let's do it. A ripple of excitement moved through the lounge. Morrow and the others stifled smirks. The staff quickly set up a custom digital target system at a deeper lane, designed for advanced practice. Multiple silhouettes would pop up in random sequence, each needing a precise shot to score. Helena stepped aside, letting Oliver go first. He picked up the Kelsing P8 again. The attendant typed instructions into the console, setting the system for 10 random pop-ups. Over the speakers, an automated voice said, "Ready." Oliver nodded. The lane lighting dimmed slightly, focusing attention on the paper silhouettes behind bulletproof glass. The first silhouette popped up at about 15 yards. Oliver exhaled. Fired. A direct hit near center. Score read 9.2. Not bad. The second silhouette zipped across, from left to right. He pivoted, squeezed the trigger in a smooth motion. Another decent score, 8.9. The watchers behind him murmured. He told himself, keep calm. Don't let them see your nerves. Third silhouette, corner of his vision. He turned, fired almost reflexively, 9.4. He heard a faint beep, acknowledging a bullseye. Some suits clapped softly, half mocking, half impressed. By the fifth silhouette, Oliver found his groove. This Kelsing pistol was scarily accurate when handled properly. He'd never used anything quite so refined. In the hush of the lounge, only the gunshots and the mechanical hum of the target system broke the silence. He realized with grim satisfaction that he was surpassing their expectations again. Shot 6 and 7 soared into center mass. On shot 8, he clipped the silhouette's left shoulder, a small dip in his score. He mentally cursed but pressed on. The last two silhouettes demanded more movement. Number 9 popped up at a longer distance. He barely had time to align, scoring a respectable 8.7. The final silhouette appeared at an odd angle, partially obscured. With a calm breath, he placed his shot just right, netting a 9.3. The system tallied. Overall average around 9.1. Oliver lowered the pistol, breath coming faster. He glanced back at Helena, who watched with measured composure. No one in the lounge laughed now. One investor whispered to another, possibly commenting on how the farmer had serious skill. Oliver set the weapon down, bracing for Helena's reaction. She approached the console, verifying the numbers. Then she gave a slight nod. "That's well above average," she conceded quietly. "I suppose your father taught you more than just plowing fields?" Oliver's chest clenched at the mention of his father, but he held his composure. "He believed in self-reliance. Guess that includes marksmanship." Helena turned to the staff. "Reset, my turn." A hush. She was going to shoot too? Oliver felt a jolt of apprehension, half impressed by her bravado. The staff reconfigured the lane, loaded a fresh magazine into the Kelsing. Helena removed her jacket, revealing toned arms beneath a fitted blouse. She took the pistol from the attendant, tested its weight with a practiced motion. When the system beeped, she fired swiftly at the first silhouette, 9.1. The second, 9.3. The watchers murmured in admiration. She barely paused between shots, each bullet hitting near the center. By the 7th silhouette, she was consistently scoring in the high 8S or low 9S. A mild tension built as she drew close to Oliver's average. On silhouette 8, a partial miss, 7.9. She frowned, readjusted. For silhouette 9, she nailed a 9.5. One more shot. The final silhouette jerked unexpectedly, but she caught it with an 8.8. The system computed her average at 8.9, just shy of Oliver's 9.1. A ripple of reaction swept through the lounge. Ms. Rossell had lost by a slim margin. Helena let out a slow breath, setting the pistol aside. Her eyes flicked to Oliver. "Seems you have me beat," she said, tone controlled. Some bystanders shifted awkwardly, unsure how to handle this upset. Morrow gave a wry smile, stepping in. "Well, well, Ms. Rossell, I suppose that means you owe Mr. Green a little consideration on his farmland situation, yes?" Helena's jaw tensed. She glanced at Oliver. "I did say I'd adjust your fees if you performed well. And you did. Fine. I'll see what can be done." Oliver's heart soared. Maybe he bought himself some time. The watchers, though, seemed less than pleased. Many had wanted to see him humiliated. Now they scowled or muttered about beginner's luck. Helena forced a polite smile. "Congratulations," she said softly. "Enjoy your small victory, but remember, one shooting contest won't solve deeper issues. I'm sure we'll speak again." Then she turned away to greet a tall, broad-shouldered woman in a crisp pantsuit, likely an HOA official who had just arrived. Their conversation resumed in hushed tones, the group stepping away to a corner. Oliver exhaled deeply. Adrenaline still pumped through his veins. He couldn't believe he'd outshot Helena Rossell in front of her wealthy clique. Yet he also suspected it was only a temporary triumph. She obviously had ways to manipulate official channels. He needed more than a promise made in the heat of a demonstration. He needed real evidence of wrongdoing or a strong advocate in local government. But at least he had glimpsed that Helena Rossell was mortal, capable of losing, capable of surprise. As the lounge quieted, a tall man in a business suit approached Oliver with a discreet nod. "Not bad, Mr. Green," he said in a low voice. "Name's Reagan Price. My father owns a string of feed supply warehouses. I'm not exactly on Helena's side, though I do business with the HOA sometimes. Frankly, I'm impressed by your determination." Oliver studied him warily. "Thanks, but I'm not looking for a sponsor or anything." Reagan gave a small laugh. "I get that, but I've seen them do this before. Pressure landowners, scare them with fees, scoop up valuable resources for corporate expansions. If you ever need a tip or two on negotiating with them or want to keep updated on their next moves, let me know." He slipped Oliver a business card. Oliver accepted it, uncertain of Reagan's motives but too polite to refuse. "Appreciate it," he muttered. By now, the novelty around Oliver's shooting had faded. The suits drifted to their corners, some returning to private deals. Helena remained locked in conversation with that tall HOA woman. Oliver recognized this as his chance to quietly exit. He had accomplished more than he dared hope. Earned a small concession from Helena, maybe an extension on the fees. He left the VIP area, returning the pistol to the main desk. The staffer at the front scanned his borrowed membership card once more, curiosity glinting in her eyes. "You, sir, are full of surprises," she murmured. Oliver only shrugged, heading out to the crisp evening air, his heart pounding with a strange mix of triumph and foreboding. That night, he parked his old pickup outside the creaky barn on his farmland. Stepping onto the porch, he looked out over the moonlit fields. He pictured the orchard his grandfather planted decades ago, the creek that meandered behind the property, the small wetlands teeming with frogs and herons. This land had a soul, a heritage he refused to let slip into corporate hands. He whispered a silent vow that he'd fight the HOA, no matter how powerful Helena Rossell seemed. In the days that followed, Oliver waited anxiously for any sign that Helena had upheld her promise. The next HOA letter arrived, referencing an extension of deadlines. True to her word, Helena had at least delayed the immediate fines, but the letter still demanded a final resolution. Some new meeting at City Hall was scheduled to discuss rezoning proposals that would affect Oliver's property. He realized the fight was far from over. Meanwhile, local gossip suggested that Helena was forging deeper alliances with certain council members. A rumor spread that she planned to build a research center near the farmland to test advanced water filtration. Oliver suspected that was code for heavy industrial usage. He reached out to a friend who had a cousin in local government, hoping to glean more details. All he heard was that Helena had everyone's ear. One late afternoon, a black SUV pulled up on the gravel road by Oliver's farmhouse. Out stepped a woman in neat attire, carrying a folder with the HOA emblem. She introduced herself as Dahlia Forbes, an official from Helena's circle. Dahlia's tone was polite but crisp. "Mr. Green, Ms. Rossell has asked me to conduct a survey of your water resources. We want to confirm the viability of that well for future expansions." Oliver's jaw tightened. "I never gave permission for any expansions." Dahlia shrugged. "It's all in the community guidelines. If the land is deemed strategically valuable, the HOA can propose development. But we are offering you a compensatory package if you sign the MOU." He stifled his anger. "I'm not signing anything until I consult someone. Maybe a lawyer." Dahlia gave a thin smile. "You're free to do so. Just remember, the clock is ticking. Ms. Rossell was gracious enough to grant you extra time after your little demonstration at the range." She lifted the folder. "If you prolong this, the fines could return at full force." Oliver folded his arms. "I'll consider the legal route." Dahlia's gaze swept the fields behind him, the orchard, the distant creek. "You have a lovely property," she remarked almost wistfully. "It's a shame you're so resistant. We'd preserve some of its features, just with new ownership, or partial usage rights." He didn't bother replying. After Dahlia left, Oliver sat on his porch, stewing in frustration. He hated feeling powerless. The next day, He called half a dozen local attorneys, but their fees were beyond his reach. The few who'd consider pro bono help had wait lists or lacked the resources to go against the HOA's legal team. He thought about contacting the media, but the local papers often showcased the HOA as philanthropic heroes, praising Helena Rossell's civic donations. She likely controlled the narrative. Then he remembered the business card from Regan Price, the man who'd approached him after the shooting contest. Could Regan provide inside info? With no better lead, Oliver dialed the number. Regan answered, sounding mildly surprised but not unfriendly. Oliver explained the new letters, Dahlia's visit, his fear that they'd still seize his well. Regan listened carefully. I heard rumors that Helena's next big push involves unveiling a new water technology in that area, he said. They're hosting a private demonstration next week at the Redwood Shooting Park. It's an event for corporate backers and government liaisons. Oliver's heart thumped. Another shooting event? Sort of. Redwood Park is bigger, more exclusive than Silverleaf, usually reserved for advanced ballistic showcases, but rumor has it Helena wants to celebrate the so-called breakthroughs for farmland usage. If you manage to get in, you might gather the proof you need about how they're planning to manipulate the zoning laws. Oliver hesitated. How would I get in? I'm not exactly on their VIP list. Regan paused, a semicolon break in his voice. Leave that to me. I can request a guest pass for a consultant, the kind of pass that doesn't raise eyebrows. If you're up for it, you could attend, keep an ear out. But it's risky. If Helena catches wind you're snooping, she might retaliate harder. Oliver stared at the farmland stretching outside his window. I'm running out of options, he said at last. Let's do it. True to his word, Regan emailed Oliver a digital pass for the Redwood Park demonstration. The invitation mentioned a state-of-the-art ballistic unveiling, courtesy of HOA's new partnership with Redwood Tech. Meanwhile, Helena's supporters in local government teased that big announcements were coming soon. Oliver sensed a storm brewing. He arrived at Redwood Park on a warm, hazy afternoon. The place was impressive, a sprawling range with multiple specialized lanes, a massive lounge building that resembled a fancy lodge, and security guards posted at every entrance. He showed his pass, adopting a calm demeanor. Inside, suited men and women mingled over cocktails, discussing deals in low voices. He glimpsed Dahlia Forbes, the HOA official, chatting with a city council member. Helena Rossell wasn't visible yet, but Oliver was sure she'd appear eventually. He slipped through the crowd, wearing a collared shirt and slacks that Regan insisted he borrow. He felt out of place, but no one immediately questioned him. Redwood staff announced that the main demonstration would start in 15 minutes. Attendees were encouraged to gather near the innovation range. Oliver followed the flow, quietly activating the voice recorder on his phone, just in case he caught any incriminating admissions. At the innovation range, bleachers overlooked a wide shooting lane with mechanical targets. A Redwood Tech representative gave a speech about their new ballistic prototypes, how these rifles or handguns boasted minimal recoil, integrated sensors, and potential for rural testing. He specifically mentioned farmland in the region. Oliver's pulse raced. This was exactly the scenario he dreaded, using farmland as a disguised test site for corporate weapon development. A hush settled as Helena Rossell took the microphone. She thanked Redwood Tech, praised their collaboration, and highlighted how the HOA was committed to progress. She spoke of farmland expansions, water resource management, all couched in the language of community improvement. Oliver seethed at how smoothly she spun her narrative. If only the media would question her. Then, Helena invited volunteers to test Redwood's latest rifle. A wave of excitement coursed through the bleachers. A few VIP attendees stepped up, took shots at targets that popped up at varying distances. Applause followed each demonstration. Oliver lingered near the edge, wanting to see if Helena was lulled into revealing anything. At one point, Dahlia Forbes pointed in Oliver's direction, whispering to Helena, A flicker of surprise crossed Helena's face as she recognized him. She abruptly turned the microphone toward him. "I see a familiar face," she said, a semicolon pause in her tone. "Mr. Oliver Green, the man with the uncanny aim, is here. Care to demonstrate how a simple farmland owner handles Redwood's advanced rifle?" All eyes swung to Oliver. He realized she was calling him out, possibly to humiliate him in front of a bigger crowd this time. Murmurs rippled. Some recognized him from the story about how he'd outshot Helena once. He swallowed the tension in his throat. This was a public setting, maybe an opportunity to speak up about the farmland or record more incriminating statements. Summoning his nerve, he walked down to the lane. Helena's cold smile told him she was confident about controlling the narrative. The Redwood staff handed Oliver a futuristic-looking rifle. He tested the weight, acknowledging that it felt meticulously engineered. The range officer informed him the targets would appear at up to 200 yards, each requiring quick acquisition. Oliver braced himself. He could handle moderate distances, but he wasn't a professional sniper. When the demonstration began, he tried to recall every technique his father had taught. Each target popped up in the distance, and he fired in controlled bursts. The rifle's advanced scope displayed data overlays, guiding him to near bullseye after near bullseye. A hush fell each time he hit metal with a resonant clang. By the 5th or 6th target, the crowd grew riveted. On the 10th shot, one that soared at a tricky angle, Oliver scored a direct center hit. Applause thundered through the bleachers. Redwood staff looked pleasantly shocked. Even Dahlia wore a guarded expression, unsure how to react. Helena approached, her posture stiff. "Impressive," she said into the microphone. "Yet again, you show a knack for marksmanship, but let's remember, real progress requires more than skill with a rifle. Are you ready to accept the necessary changes for your farmland, Mr. Green?" Oliver felt the eyes of the crowd. He turned, taking the mic from Helena with a steady hand. "My farmland doesn't need to be turned into a private weapons test ground," he said, voice echoing through the speaker system. "My father spent his life cultivating that soil, caring for the creek, keeping the wetlands safe. If the HOA really wants to help the community, they wouldn't threaten me with fines or try to snatch away water rights. They'd actually listen to the people who live on that land." A ripple of unease spread among the audience. Some had no clue about the deeper conflict. They'd come for a fancy demonstration, but Helena's eyes flashed with annoyance. She snatched the mic back. "We've offered you fair compensation. If you cling to an obsolete notion of ownership, you'll be left behind." Before Oliver could respond, Redwood staff intervened, urging everyone to continue the demonstration. The tension was palpable. Helena, enraged by Oliver's public challenge, retreated to a side area with Dahlia and a few suits. Oliver, overhearing snatches of conversation, caught phrases like "shut him down," "accelerate legal enforcement," and "council meeting next week." He realized Helena intended to finalize the farmland takeover at the upcoming council meeting. Time was short. He left Redwood Park soon after, having gleaned enough to know the crisis was imminent. Back at his farmhouse, Oliver scrambled for help. He phoned local environmental groups explaining how farmland might be used for corporate ballistic testing. At first, they sounded skeptical, so he shared audio clips from his phone where Helena all but admitted using farmland for expansions. The environmental activists perked up. They promised to dispatch an investigator. Oliver also contacted Reagan Price, updating him on Redwood's demonstration. Reagan shared that he'd heard rumors of a hush-hush closing deal at the next council session. If Helena secured enough votes, she'd have near unlimited rights to rezone lands, including Oliver's. Desperate, Oliver visited neighbors in the region, many also facing HOA pressure. He urged them to attend the council meeting, speak out, show solidarity. Some agreed. Others were too frightened. having seen how swiftly the HOA retaliated. The day of the council meeting dawned with an air of foreboding. City Hall's parking lot overflowed. Inside, suits from Redwood Tech, HOA officials, and a handful of anxious farmers milled about. Helena Russell stood near the front row, calm in her immaculate attire, greeting certain council members with a handshake or a subtle nod. It all looked orchestrated. Oliver and a few farmers found seats behind them. The meeting began with mundane agenda items until the rezoning proposal came up. Helena's allies spoke glowingly of economic growth, innovative weapon technology, and community modernization. Some council members voiced mild reservations, but they seemed overshadowed by Helena's influence. At last, Oliver was called to speak. He approached the microphone in a hush. He felt an avalanche of nerves, but the memory of his father's orchard and the wetlands steeled him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, semicolons marking his beats of emphasis, "this proposal isn't about community progress. It's about letting a powerful group turn our farmland into a private laboratory for corporate gain. The HOA has threatened me with fines, manipulated zoning laws, and lied about preserving heritage." Murmurs rose. Helena kept her expression poised, but Dahlia shot Oliver a venomous glare. He continued, "I have recordings of Ms. Rossell's statements at Redwood Park, revealing their true goals, exploiting water resources, ignoring local farmers. We risk losing not just farmland, but also a vital ecosystem." Gasps. The council members whispered among themselves. One asked if Oliver had such recordings. He nodded. "Yes, I'm prepared to share them." Helena stood abruptly. "This is slander," she declared. "Mr. Green is twisting facts. We've offered him fair solutions, but he's stonewalled every effort." Oliver turned to her. "A fair solution doesn't involve extortion, Ms. Russell, nor does it involve turning farmland into a weapons test site with no local consent." The tension in the chamber grew thick. Some council members demanded an executive session to review Oliver's evidence. The gallery erupted in heated debate. In the swirl, Oliver noticed Reagan Price entering with a local environmental attorney. They signaled that they had more documentation. In the end, the council chair declared they'd postpone the final vote until they examined Oliver's claims and verified the recordings. It was a victory, albeit temporary. Helena, outraged, stormed out, followed by her suits. Dahlia lingered just long enough to hiss at Oliver, "You'll regret crossing us." But for the first time, Oliver felt a glimmer of hope that the HOA's unstoppable march might be slowed. Over the next week, a wave of media interest descended upon the farmland controversy. Journalists interviewed Oliver, neighbors, and environmental advocates. They questioned how the HOA gained so much sway. Helena tried damage control, insisting it was all a misunderstanding. She even challenged Oliver to produce undeniable proof. So Oliver and the attorney arranged a small press briefing, playing snippets of Helena's Redwood Park statements about farmland expansions for ballistic testing. Public sentiment soured against the HOA. Certain officials distanced themselves from Helena, refusing to push her rezoning demand. 2 weeks later, under intense scrutiny, the council convened again. This time, half the seats were filled with local residents holding signs that read, "Save our farmland" and "No corporate takeover." Helena arrived with fewer allies, her usual arrogance replaced by stiff composure. The council chair announced that after reviewing the evidence and hearing from environmental agencies, they would not move forward with the rezoning measure. The HOA's near monopoly on farmland acquisitions was halted. An uproar of applause echoed in the chamber. Oliver closed his eyes, relief pouring through him. He'd done it. He'd exposed the scheme. Outside, cameras flashed, capturing the image of Helena striding away, face taut with anger. Dahlia hurried after her. Later that day, Oliver stood in his orchard, phone buzzing with texts from neighbors who thanked him for standing up. He felt exhausted but triumphant. The farmland's fate was no longer sealed by the HOA's greed. It might not be a perfect resolution. The HOA still existed, still had money, but they no longer had free rein to bulldoze him. He recalled the mocking laughter at Silverleaf Shooting Club, how they ridiculed him when he first arrived with shaky aim. 10 shots, 10 improbable near-perfect shots had opened a door for him. That showdown forced Helena to give him an extension, which eventually led to unraveling her bigger plan. It struck Oliver just how one moment of skill or defiance can ripple into far-reaching consequences. He picked an apple from a low branch, biting into its crisp sweetness. The taste reminded him of childhood, of simpler times with his father. Though the farm needed repairs and finances remained tight, he'd gained a new sense of empowerment. He was no marksman champion nor a cunning politician, but with enough courage and occasionally enough luck, he had faced billionaires, outshot Helena Russell, and saved his home. Some time later, he returned to Silverleaf Shooting Club, no longer trembling or out of place. This time, he came with a newfound confidence. He practiced at Lane 7 again, shaping his aim, each bullet a testament to what he'd accomplished. Some staff recognized him, whispering about the farm guy who beat Ms. Russell. He didn't gloat, he simply honed his skill, reflecting on how that fateful day had changed everything. Outside, the sun shone over open fields and quiet roads, and on his farmland, life continued. Perhaps that was the real triumph, to preserve the space where nature thrived, where families nurtured legacies, and where a determined man refused to be trampled by wealth and intimidation. He holstered the pistol, exhaling slowly. In the hush of the shooting lane, Oliver Green, once mocked as a nobody, stood tall, knowing that the simplest person can shake the foundations of power if they stay true to their cause. He left the club with a sense of calm, ready to plant new crops in the orchard, feed the livestock, and protect the land he loved. The land that, thanks to one improbable victory, still belonged to him.